have been searching in all the wrong places. For years, perhaps decades, you have been looking outside yourself for what can only be found within. You have sought God in churches and temples, in the words of priests and gurus, in rituals and ceremonies that promised connection but delivered only more longing. You have prayed to a distant deity, begged for mercy from an external power, hoped that if you were good enough, pure enough, devoted enough, you might earn the love of a God who sits somewhere far above you, judging your every move. And all the while, the truth has been burning inside your chest, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to stop seeking and start remembering, waiting for you to understand that the union you crave, the intimacy with the divine that your soul hungers for, is not something you must achieve. It is something you must recognize, because God is not separate from you. God is not outside you. God is the very essence of what you are, the consciousness that animates your being, the love that breathes you into existence moment by moment. This is the truth that will either liberate you completely or offend you so deeply that you will close this video and return to your comfortable suffering. The choice is yours. But before you decide, I want you to feel something. Right now, as you read these words, there is a presence within you that is aware of these words, aware of your thoughts about these words, aware of your breathing, your heartbeat, the sensation of your body existing in space. That awareness, that witnessing presence, that is not you. That is what you are, and that is the doorway to God. Joshua David Stone understood this with a clarity that cut through centuries of religious programming designed to keep you small, keep you dependent, keep you believing that you are fundamentally separate from Source. He taught that the journey of ascension is not about reaching up to touch a distant God. It is about reaching in to discover that you and God have never been separate. The kingdom of heaven is not somewhere you go when you die if you have lived correctly. The kingdom of heaven is within you, accessible right now in this moment if you are willing to shift your perception from separation to unity. But here is what makes this teaching so challenging for most people. It requires you to take full responsibility for your spiritual life. You can no longer outsource your connection to God to external authorities. You can no longer wait for permission from religious institutions to experience the divine directly. You can no longer hide behind the belief that you are too flawed, too broken, too sinful to touch the sacred. Because if God is within you, if you are an expression of divine consciousness, then there is no intermediary needed. There is no one standing between you and your own divinity. There is only you and your willingness to stop pretending you are separate from the source of all creation. This terrifies people, because if you are not separate from God, if you carry divinity within you, then you cannot blame God for your suffering. You cannot play the victim to a capricious deity who randomly bestows favor and punishment. You cannot absolve yourself of responsibility for the quality of your life by claiming that it is all in God's hands. You must own your power. You must recognize that you are a creator, that your consciousness shapes your experience, that the life you are living is a reflection of the beliefs and frequencies you are holding inside yourself. Do you understand how radical this is? How completely it dismantles the foundation of conventional religion? Stone was not teaching feel-good spirituality designed to make you comfortable with your limitations. He was teaching the path of spiritual mastery, the recognition that you are here to embody divinity in human form, to bring heaven to earth through your consciousness, your choices, your willingness to stop playing small and start claiming your divine inheritance. But most people do not want this responsibility. They want a religion that tells them what to do, how to think, who to be. They want a God they can bargain with, beg from, blame when things go wrong. They want the illusion of separation because taking ownership of their divine nature is too overwhelming, too demanding, too likely to require actual transformation rather than just weekly attendance and memorized prayers. And so they stay stuck. They go through the motions of spiritual practice without ever touching the essence of what that practice is pointing toward. They read scripture without letting it penetrate their heart. They pray without ever actually listening for the response that comes not from outside, but from within. They seek God everywhere except the one place God actually resides, in the silent depths of their own being. If this describes you, if you have been seeking without finding, praying without connecting, believing without experiencing, then I need you to understand something. You are not doing anything wrong. You have simply been looking in the wrong direction. And the moment you turn your attention inward, the moment you stop seeking and start being, everything changes. The God you have been trying to reach has been waiting for you to come home to yourself all along. Stone taught that this inner union is not an intellectual concept to understand, but an experiential reality to embody. It requires you to develop a practice of going inward, of sitting in silence, of learning to distinguish between the voice of your ego mind and the voice of your higher self. It requires you to heal the parts of yourself that believe you are unworthy of divine love. It requires you to forgive yourself for all the ways you have betrayed your own truth, all the times you have chosen fear over love, all the moments you have abandoned yourself to please others or fit into systems that do not honor your sacred nature. This is inner work, deep, uncomfortable, often painful inner work, because union with God is not about adding something to yourself. It is about removing everything that is not God. It is about stripping away the false identities, the protective masks, the defensive strategies, the limiting beliefs, the unexamined conditioning that has convinced you that you are small, separate, and fundamentally alone. It is about dying to who you think you are, so that who you actually are can finally emerge. And who are you actually? You are consciousness itself, temporarily experiencing limitation for the purpose of expansion. You are divinity in human form, here to learn, to grow, to evolve, to contribute your unique expression to the symphony of creation. You are love attempting to remember itself through the experience of forgetting. You are God exploring what it means to be separate, so that union, when it comes, will be chosen consciously rather than simply assumed unconsciously. This is the path Stone dedicated his life to teaching, not because he wanted followers or fame or to build another religion around himself, but because he had experienced this union directly and knew that it was available to everyone, that it was in fact the birthright of every human being, and that the only thing preventing people from experiencing it was their belief that it was not possible, not for them, not in this lifetime, not without decades of ascetic discipline or divine intervention. He taught that union with God begins with a simple decision, the decision to stop looking outside and start looking within, the decision to trust your own direct experience over external authority. The decision to claim your power as a divine being, having a human experience rather than a flawed human, hoping to one day be worthy of God's attention. The decision to love yourself so completely, so unconditionally, that you recognize that love as the love of God expressing through you. This is not narcissism. This is not ego inflation. This is the most humble recognition possible, that you, in and of yourself, are nothing, but you, as an expression of infinite consciousness, are everything. The personal you, the small self with its preferences and aversions and endless narratives, must dissolve. But the true you, the eternal witness, the divine presence that has always been and will always be, that must be recognized, honored, and allowed to lead your life. When you live from this place of inner union, everything changes. Not because your external circumstances necessarily change, though they often do, but because your relationship to those circumstances transforms completely. You stop being a victim of life and become a conscious participant in it. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from love. You stop seeking happiness in external conditions and start generating it from within. You stop waiting for permission to be who you are and start embodying your truth regardless of who that challenges or confuses. This is spiritual maturity. This is what Stone called integrated ascension. Not an escape from the world, but a complete engagement with it from a place of remembered divinity. Not a denial of your humanity, but an embrace of it as the vehicle through which God experiences limitation, sensation, emotion, relationship, creativity, and ultimately, love. If you have felt the longing for this union, if something in you recognizes the truth of what I'm saying, then like this video, leave a comment sharing your own experience of seeking God within, and subscribe so we can continue this journey together. Because what I'm about to share with you is not another teaching to add to your collection. It is the story of someone who found what you are looking for, not by searching harder, but by finally understanding where to look. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to discover about the nature of divine union. Isabel knelt in the garden behind her grandmother's house in Andalusia, her hands deep in the warm Spanish soil, planting basil seedlings that would flavor the summer gazpachos and salads. The afternoon sun pressed against her shoulders, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the bells of the cathedral marking the hour. She had returned to this village 6 months ago, to this house where she had spent her childhood summers, to this slower rhythm of life that felt like medicine after years of spiritual searching that had left her more exhausted than enlightened. She was 36 years old and had spent the last decade trying to find God. She had studied with teachers in India and Peru. She had attended retreats and workshops and ceremonies. She had read countless books, practiced various forms of meditation, learned to chant in Sanskrit and Quechua. She had accumulated knowledge about enlightenment, about consciousness, about the nature of reality. But she had never, not once, felt the actual presence of the divine she was seeking. She had information about God, but no experience of God. And the gap between those two things had become unbearable. Her grandmother, Abuela Lucia, watched from the kitchen window, her ancient hands preparing the evening meal with the same graceful efficiency she had practiced for 87 years. When Isabel came inside, washing the soil from her hands, Lucia said quietly, "You are still looking for something, Nieta. I can see it in your eyes. That searching. When will you stop?" Isabel felt tears rise unexpectedly. "I do not know how to stop. I have tried everything, Abuela. I have done all the practices, followed all the teachings, but I still feel so far from God, still so alone." Lucia dried her hands and came to Isabel, cupping her granddaughter's face with palms that smelled of olive oil and garlic. "My child, you cannot find what you have never lost. You are looking for God out there." She gestured toward the window, toward the world beyond, when God has been here all along. She placed her hand over Isabel's heart. "Right here, always here. You do not need more teachers or practices. You need to stop running and come home to yourself." The words landed in Isabel like seeds in prepared soil. She had heard similar things before, read them in books, heard them in lectures. But hearing them from her grandmother, this woman who had never attended a workshop or read a spiritual text, but who moved through life with a grace and presence that Isabel envied, made them real in a way they had never been before. That night, Isabel could not sleep. She sat by her bedroom window, looking out at the olive groves silvered by moonlight, and asked herself a question she had been avoiding for years. What if she had been approaching this all wrong? What if the union she sought was not something to achieve, but something to recognize? What if God was not distant and unreachable, but intimate and immediate, closer than her own breath? She remembered a book she had brought with her but never opened, one a friend had given her years ago. She found it in her bag, its pages still crisp and unread, the Inner Mastery series by Joshua David Stone. She opened it randomly and read, "The greatest illusion is not that God exists outside you. The greatest illusion is that you exist outside God. You are not seeking union with the divine. You are the divine, temporarily pretending to be separate so that union, when remembered, can be experienced as the miracle it truly is." Isabel read that passage 3 times, each reading stripping away another layer of the seeking that had defined her adult life. What if it was true? What if she had spent years trying to reach something she already was? What if the emptiness she felt was not the absence of God, but the presence of God waiting to be acknowledged? She began to cry, but these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of a burden she had been carrying finally being set down. She did not need to go anywhere, do anything, become anyone else. She simply needed to stop. Stop seeking, stop striving, stop believing she was separate from the love she had been chasing across continents and through countless teachings. The next morning, Isabel woke before dawn and sat in the garden, not to meditate, not to practice, not to achieve anything, just to be, to feel the cool morning air on her skin, to hear the first birds beginning their songs, to watch light slowly reveal the world. And in that simple presence, without trying, without technique, she felt it, a warmth in her chest, a sense of being held by something infinitely larger than herself, a knowing, clear and certain, that she was not alone, had never been alone, could never be alone, because the consciousness that moved through her was the same consciousness that moved through everything. It was not dramatic. There were no visions or voices or cosmic revelations, just a quiet recognition that the presence she had been seeking had been with her all along, waiting patiently for her to stop looking elsewhere and notice what had always been here. Isabel began to laugh and cry at the same time, her body shaking with the release of years of spiritual striving. All those teachers, all those practices, all that seeking, and the answer had been so simple, so immediate, so available that she had overlooked it completely. God was not in India or Peru or in any external practice. God was in the awareness that noticed the practice. God was in the silence between her thoughts. God was in the love she felt for the soil under her fingernails and the birds singing overhead and her grandmother moving through the kitchen preparing breakfast. Over the weeks that followed, Isabel's relationship with everything shifted. She still helped her grandmother with the garden and the cooking and the daily rhythms of village life. She still went to the market on Tuesday mornings and helped prepare lunch for the extended family on Sundays. But she moved through these ordinary activities with an extraordinary presence, with a quality of attention that transformed everything it touched. She noticed that when she washed dishes, really washed them with full presence, rather than rushing through to get to the next thing, she felt connected to the water, to her hands, to the simple act of caring for these objects that served her family. When she prepared food, cutting vegetables with mindfulness, she felt the life force in the plants, felt gratitude for their gift, felt herself as part of the great cycle of nourishment and sustenance. When she spoke with neighbors in the plaza, she looked into their eyes and saw not separate individuals, but expressions of the same consciousness looking back at itself. Her grandmother noticed. Everyone noticed. There was something different about Isabel now, something peaceful and present that had not been there before. People began coming to her with their troubles, their questions, their grief. Not because she offered advice or solutions, but because being in her presence somehow made their burdens feel lighter, their confusion clearer, their pain more bearable. One afternoon, a young woman from the village came to Isabel in tears. Her husband had left her for another woman, and she felt abandoned by God, convinced she was being punished for some unknown sin. Isabel listened, held her hand, and then said gently, "God has not abandoned you. That is impossible. God is not outside you, waiting to reward or punish. God is the awareness in you that notices the pain. God is the love in you that wants to heal. God is the strength in you that will help you move through this. You think you have lost God because you have lost your husband, but all you have lost is the illusion that anyone outside you could give you the love and wholeness you can only give yourself." The woman looked at her with confusion, then understanding, then something like hope. "How do I find that? How do I give myself that love?" Isabel smiled. "By stopping the search, by sitting quietly and noticing that you are still here, still breathing, still alive. By recognizing that the part of you that is aware of your pain is not in pain. By understanding that you are not your story, not your circumstances, not even your emotions. You are the vast, eternal awareness in which all of those things arise and pass. And that awareness is made of love. That awareness is God. You do not need to find it. You need to recognize it. The woman sat in silence for a long time. Then she said quietly, "I feel it. Right now. I feel it." And Isabel nodded, tears in her own eyes, because she knew what the woman was experiencing, the recognition of her own divine nature, the homecoming to herself. Word spread through the village that Isabel had become someone who could help, not through techniques or teachings, but through presence, through her embodiment of the union she had discovered. People began gathering at her grandmother's house on Sunday evenings, sitting in the garden as the light faded, sharing their struggles and their insights, their questions and their realizations. Isabel did not set herself up as a teacher. She simply shared what she had learned, that the union with God everyone was seeking was already present, already complete, already available in every moment. That the spiritual journey was not about going somewhere, but about recognizing where you already are. That God was not a distant parent to be pleased, but an intimate presence to be acknowledged. That prayer was not begging or bargaining, but listening, sitting in silence and allowing the voice of your higher self, which is the voice of God within you, to speak. She taught them what Stone had taught her through his books, that ascension is integration, not escape. That the path is not about denying your humanity, but about recognizing your humanity as the vessel through which divinity expresses. That you do not need permission from any external authority to experience God directly, because God is the very consciousness you are using to seek God. That the kingdom of heaven is not later, not elsewhere, but now, here, within. Her grandmother would sit in her chair, listening to Isabel guide people home to themselves, and occasionally Lucia would catch Isabel's eye and smile, a smile that said, "I knew you would find what you were looking for when you stopped looking so hard." One evening, after everyone had gone home, Isabel sat with her grandmother on the terrace, drinking the herbal tea Lucia made from herbs she grew herself. The stars above them were so bright, so numerous, that Isabel felt she could reach up and touch them. She said softly, "Abuela, how did you know? How did you know what I needed to hear?" Lucia shrugged. "I did not know. But God knew. And when you stop trying to be the one with all the answers, God speaks through you. That is what happened. God spoke through this old woman to reach you. And now God speaks through you to reach others. This is how it works, Nieta. We are all just instruments. The music is the same. The melody is love." Isabel leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder, feeling the profound truth of those words settle into her bones. She thought about the woman she had been 6 months ago, so exhausted from seeking, so convinced she was failing at spirituality because she had not had dramatic experiences or mystical visions. She had thought union with God would feel like fireworks, like being struck by lightning, like some unmistakable cosmic event that would validate all her years of searching. But it had not been like that at all. It had been quiet, ordinary. As simple as noticing that the presence she sought had been with her all along, had never left, could never leave because it was not separate from her. It was her, in her deepest essence. She was not a human trying to reach God. She was God experiencing what it was like to be human. And that recognition, that simple shift in perception, had changed everything. If Isabel's journey resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in her years of external seeking and her eventual return to the sacred within, then like this video, share in the comments what seeking God has looked like in your life, and subscribe so we can continue exploring this path of inner union together. Because the truth Isabel discovered, the truth Stone taught, the truth that is available to every single one of us right now, is this: you do not need to go anywhere, achieve anything, or become someone else to experience union with God. You simply need to stop, turn inward, and recognize what has always been true. God is not waiting for you somewhere in the distant future, contingent on your finally getting it right, finally being pure enough, finally completing enough practices. God is here, Now, in this moment, in the awareness that is reading these words, in the breath that is breathing you, in the life force that animates your existence, God is not separate from you. God is the deepest truth of what you are. And the moment you stop seeking and start being, the moment you stop performing spirituality and start embodying it, the moment you release the illusion of separation and claim your divine inheritance, everything transforms. Not because the world changes, though your perception of it will, but because you finally come home to yourself, to the sacred presence that has been waiting within you all along. You stop being a beggar at the gates of heaven and recognize yourself as the heaven you were seeking. You stop praying to a distant God and realize you are the answer to your own prayers. You stop looking for love outside yourself and discover that you are love itself, expressed in human form for the sacred purpose of bringing more love, more consciousness, more divine presence into this world. This is the path. This is the union. This is what you have been hungering for beneath all your seeking, all your striving, all your spiritual ambition, not a certificate of enlightenment or a cosmic promotion, but a coming home to yourself so complete, so total, that you finally understand what the mystics have been trying to tell you all along. You and God are not two. You have never been two. And the key to experiencing that union is not out there in some teaching or technique or teacher. The key is within you, has always been within you, waiting for you to finally turn around and look. That looking begins now, in this moment, with this breath, with this choice to stop abandoning yourself in search of yourself and to simply be, fully and completely, the divine expression you already are. Welcome home.